That's another thing with anxiety and depression. You can really throw yourself a pity party. And sometimes what helps is just to get out your head, and you are special, you are important to you and to people around you. But you have to be the number one person to know that. And you're not the only one who's going through something. And you are so much stronger than you think you are.
Welcome to Stronger Than You Think, a podcast by Youth Villages. I'm your host, Alec Ogg. In this inaugural episode of the show, we wanted to tell you a little bit about it. In each episode, you'll hear a story of resilience from a former foster youth. They've overcome unimaginably difficult circumstances, and they'll share a mental health practice or mindset that helped them persevere. You'll also be hearing from mental health professionals who work at Youth Villages. They'll add some clinical perspective on how you can incorporate these mental health tools into your own life so that you can be stronger than you think. Our guest today is Darrah Hall. Darrah entered child services at age 12, but is 29 now. We'll be discussing growing up with a parent with mental illness, dealing with depression and anxiety in your 20s, and the effectiveness of positive affirmations. You'll also be hearing from Kristen Landers. Kristen is a licensed marriage and family therapist with Youth Villages.
We are partnering with organizations across the country to implement the program called LifeSet. This program is designed for 17 to 22-year-old young people who are either aging out of care or juvenile justice systems or other opportunity youth. And so it's building those skills during that really, really critical period of time.
Since Kristen's team develops evidence-based interventions at Youth Villages, she's joined us to add some clinical commentary to our discussion on mental health practices. Before we get into Darrah's story, I wanted to give a quick content warning that this episode contains references that may be triggering and difficult to hear. This includes references to mental illness. This trigger warning is to empower you as the listener to make a healthy decision about if, when, and how you should consume this episode. If you need support, please look at the links for resources we've listed in the show notes. Now here's Darrah's story.
Growing up, it was a challenge. It was a huge challenge. My mom, I love my mom to death. She's the best. She, along with countless other Americans, has a mental illness. Well, I'll just say condition because it's not an illness. It's her condition. It's bipolar schizophrenia. And so that condition, along with growing up in poverty too in South Memphis, low income household, it was hard for my mom to provide for us consistently. My mom's temperament sometimes would change. Her mood would change. And so, we'd have times where my mom, where she's her usual uplifting, caring, life of the party, funny, fun, loving person. But then there were times when she was depressed and quiet and just laid down all day. And then there were times when, she's on the hyper side, and she doesn't mind telling you how she feels. And, anyone in her way, look, it's her way or the highway, so imagine as a child that constant change, nothing was steady. So that was difficult. We lived in a duplex growing up. Every neighbor became public enemy number one at some point with my mom because of her condition. So just chaos, disagreements. My mom, she's naturally giving at heart, right? But sometimes when you're manic, you just give away too much. You just do, you take everything to another level. So my mom would give away food to neighbors, cigarettes, drinks, anything she could give, knowing that she didn't have it. And so I'm protecting her against these junkies. There's one person in particular. I stood up to him when I was 10 years old, and I told him, I said, you are a grown man. Stop asking my mama for money and for cigarettes. And he told my mama, you need to watch her. She too grown. But see, another challenging component of that was my mom, once she saw that leadership in me, expecting me to do things that a 10-year-old shouldn't have to do, take on responsibility that I didn't have to take on. My brother is autistic. I would get up an hour early as a 10-year-old child, bathe my brother, and he was not potty trained. I'm 10 years old with a 12-year-old boy, bathing him, okay, feeding him, cooking his breakfast, making sure he gets on the bus, iron his clothes, and my mama sleep in the living room. Because I always had that innate sense of self and forward thinking, I just always dreamed of the day that it would be over. I always knew ever since I was a young child, before my life was ever impacted by foster care, that I had a purpose over my life. Like, I knew it. And some people are born with that inner sense of self. And it's a gift from God, and I thank God for it. I always knew. I had a neighbor named Miss Aura, and I love Miss Aura. She's an older woman. She could not read or write. And one time when I was 10 years old, she just saw me walking home from school. She just caught me just walking up Kansas Street, and she went to my mom, and she told my mama, she said, that girl, she's gonna be something. She said, it's the way she walked. She said she walks like she's gonna be something, and I pray that I live to see it. She saw what I knew deep down. I've always had a compassion for people. I mean, my mom had a mental illness. My oldest brother, Darrah, been locked up since 95. He's been locked up since I've known him. My first memory is, putting my hand across the plexiglass at 201 Poplar to wave at my brother. My oldest brother locked up. My other oldest brother, autistic, can't speak. My mama, mental illness. The neighborhood we live in, poor, lots of just desperation. I knew. I said, no, this not gonna be my life, and it's not gonna be their life either. That's how I always looked at it. I was like, I'm gonna help the people I grew up with. I used to always say that. I grew up on Kansas Street. I would always sit on our step, look to the left, up towards the curve, and just daydream. I knew it. I believe I was 12 when DCS came that day and removed us from my mom's home. We got a knock on the door, and I was smart beyond my years. I knew what was happening. I was happy because I knew, I was like, finally, some structure, some stability is about to come. There was a police car outside, and the next thing I know, they put us in the back of that police car and took us down to juvenile court, and that's where my Aunt Joy worked at the time, and they brought us there. I didn't realize the heaviness or the weight of that situation now, speaking upon it. I'm 29, but I was 12 years old. You may have that little inner knowledge, but you just have to see how life plays out. So, I went through foster care, again, something I kept on the hush-hush. Did not want people to know what was going on. I get to college, I think it's my sophomore year, and I found out that I qualified for funding from Department of Children's Services, that I qualified for a scholarship. So they told me about it. I went and met with my old independent living specialist, and she said, Darrah, you're doing so good. Can you come and speak to these high schoolers? They're about to graduate high school. They're in foster care. Can you come speak to them? I said, yeah, of course. Spoke to them. One person in attendance at that time was then City Councilman Lee Harris, who is now Shelby County Mayor. So Lee Harris heard me speak and heard my story then when I was in college. Maybe a month or two later, I get a letter from Youth Villages. At the time, it was called the Transitional Living Program. They said, you qualify for our program. I was accepted into the TL program, which is now LifeSet. When I had my TL specialist, Miss Erica Summers, hello, she was wonderful. And I was one of those youth, again, I didn't need much because I already had a job, I already had a car, and I was already in school. But she helped me with getting an apartment and in other ways. So from there, that's when I met some of the other Youth Villages staff, and they asked me, well, do you mind speaking at this meeting to talk about the TL program? And from there, that's when it started, that's when it led me into public policy and advocacy, something that I'd always wanted to do, but I didn't know it would come through foster care. So those experiences gave me a platform, led me to receiving the internship with the Congressional Coalition on Adoption Institute, and I got to advocate for foster care on a federal level. And so there we are. So now that's how it's tied to my purpose, because not only have I just done this advocacy work, but I've also been able to mentor youth in foster care. I worked as a peer advocate at juvenile court, so I met with older youth every month about, issues. So I got to just inspire and help and support youth currently going through the situation, going through foster care, and sharpen my policy and advocacy skills, and now I'm here. Growing up, I was always beyond proud of my story and proud. I had no shame in telling people I'm from South Memphis. I overcame this. I did this. It empowered me. But when I moved to DC and I actually was surrounded by people who may have come from two-parent households with a way higher income than I did, a higher education. I'm the first person in my family to graduate from college, just my immediate family. Like, I didn't have anyone to ask about an internship. The first internship I ever did was after I graduated college. I mean, I'm working alongside people. This is their 5th internship. They've traveled abroad. They've done all this. And one person, I was at a happy hour event for a group, African Americans on the Hill or something, and I was sharing my story with a couple of the young ladies I met, and this one young girl told me, I wouldn't share that with anyone if I were you. She said, I wouldn't tell anyone that. And so at first, I was like, girl, please. I'm thinking, who she thinks she talking to? Who she don't know me? But it sank in. The more, when I dropped the ball at work, my first big girl job, and I can't ask my mom or anyone in my family, what did you do when that happened? Because I'm the only one doing it. And I want to be the perfectionist. I want to be the one to get it right because everyone thinks I have it right. So, yeah, so those fears of, will I inherit this, alongside the real life down moments that I experienced were really hard. One way I've helped to remedy that fear in my mind is just through building a stronger relationship with my mom. She's 68, and last year I moved back 2 years ago, but I remember we had a conversation last year, and she was saying, I've been praying to God to take the bipolar away from me. I'm healed from bipolar. And I said, Mom, you're managing bipolar. I said, God created you this way. This is something for you to manage. You are in control of this. And that helped me. I didn't even realize what I was saying, how helpful that was. And now my mom, she can speak openly to me about whether she's manic, how she's feeling. When she wouldn't talk that, she wouldn't be that way. So I have that same grace with myself. But I certainly have had my moments, like down moments, where I did not think. Well, I was like, I felt like a failure. I felt like all these missed opportunities. This is our mid-20s, and Youth Villages really not only helped me, with the YV Life Set program, but they helped me take foster care to a professional platform for me. And so for a while, I thought I was doing great. I was, speaking with Youth Villages. I did the internship with CCAI, Congressional Coalition on Adoption Institute. But after a while, I was like, I don't want to just be known as the foster care girl. I was like, let me just focus on working in DC and creating a lane for myself. And then once I struggled in that lane, that's when I really started to feel like a failure. I said, dog, Darrah, you had it made. You could have really been, you could have kept the momentum going. And so that added a lot to, just this cycle of regret, shame, guilt, not speaking, withdrawing from people. I know that my lived experience in foster care and the label of foster youth had a direct impact on that. So one thing that I felt proud, one aspect that I once felt proud with sharing with people, now it's something that's only reserved if I want to share it with you, because I'm scared, I'm afraid of what you're gonna think. You're gonna think, she's broken, she can't get it together. Oh, and that's why she can't get her, what together, because of this. But I had moments in my mid-20s where depression was my life. It was a battle between depression and anxiety. And it started off that I didn't know I was depressed. I didn't know I was anxious. I just knew, I'm not feeling confident about this. I'll figure it out. And then I started withdrawing from people. And someone would reach out and I forget to text them back because I'm dealing with my own thing. And that, me forgetting to text you back, I felt guilty. And then the guilt just was buried with shame. And then all the other things I'm dealing with. And the next thing I know, it's been a month and I haven't spoken to someone, even family members. And, resentment was a big thing because while I am, of course, a champion for my mom or a champion for people dealing with that, of course, when I get in my 20s and I'm dealing with it myself and I feel like, who can I talk to? I wish I came from a, quote, normal family. Why did I have to experience this? I had to take care of my mama my whole life. Who's going to take care of me? So that's how it surfaced. And because growing up, I was the strong one. I was the youngest, but I was the one who everyone counted on to make it because they knew I had an innate sense of self within me and a sense of purpose. But just because I have that doesn't mean I don't need developing, right? Or some affirmations or some affirming or support from someone. I didn't get that. So that proved to be a challenge for me when life hit the fan.
Now, to bring it over to Kristen, how would you describe the depression you see with the young people you work with?
It's a getting stuck. And then I think what happens for people is intellectually you understand that the best thing you could do for yourself would be to answer that text message, to call that support person. And yet your brain, you're low. I mean, you're hormonally, neurologically low. As much as your intellect understands what you need to do, neurologically, it's really hard to do it. I mean, that's what depression is, right? It's like the inability to manage some of those things. And I think, unfortunately, what happens is it becomes this cycle. You know what you need to do, you can't do it, and then you are ashamed, right? So the shame then compounds your ability to know what you need to do. So when you feel ashamed, you think, I can't reach out now. It was 2 weeks ago. I'm anxious about that. They're going to think I'm not a good friend, not a good person. And so you've got this whole cycle of negative talk, right? Which just feeds into the original struggle of depression. And you're just on this like hamster run in your brain about knowing that you need to get off and being stuck. And so you just go around and around. And I think shame, shame really compounds things like depression. And it's very difficult.
Darrah, what would you say to someone in their 20s who may feel stuck because of anxiety and depression right now?
I would say to first off, give yourself grace. And by grace, meaning just be patient and kind to yourself as best as you can be at this time. Take a walk. You have to get out of your mind because I've been in my mind. I've been there so many times. I know what it's like. I really do. And sometimes just taking a quick action will help me. And most importantly, reach out for help. And just know this. Know that you have so much value and you have so much more value than you think. Like, people really care about you. The world would not be the same without you. So you have to know that. Just remember that. And whenever it gets too hard to ask for help, remember. You have to give yourself that grace. It does start with you. And sometimes I know it's hard, but we don't really realize how powerful we are. So if you know that you have value, then that will help you. You just have to find a way to convince yourself of that.
Kristen, would you recommend something like positive affirmations as an effective tool to help convince yourself of your own value?
100%. And I will tell you that is an intervention that we recommend very, very frequently, not only to parents, but to younger people. Essentially, it's cognitive behavioral therapy, right? You are replacing, or the hope is, you're replacing a negative thought with a positive thought. To me, that's a positive affirmation. And I think what happens neurologically, you are now sort of dosing yourself with positive talk, which increases your dopamine and your serotonin and all those, neurological things that you need to have to help yourself feel better. I believe fundamentally in whatever you want to call it, whether it's positive affirmation, positive self-talk, cognitive behavioral therapy. Yes, I mean, I would say that is critically important, particularly if you struggle from depression.
Darrah, have you ever practiced repeating positive affirmations?
Oh, yes. So that's another thing I've been able to do in my career is host affirmation workshops. And so I've worked with young girls, teaching them how to write affirmations, all different age groups. And it's so funny. You hear different affirmations from like a group of 10-year-olds versus some 17-year-olds. For me, yes, I write affirmations. Now, I won't say I do them every day because I don't. The goal is to, but my biggest affirmation that I say to myself is, I got this, all the time. Like, I got this. Or a great helpful exercise is to just write 3 prompts. I am blank. I have blank. I am worthy of blank. So you can say, I have abundance. I am grateful. I deserve peace. But it's good to start with gratitude. That's a big thing that I want to relay to anyone who may hit that rough patch in life like I did. You have to start with gratitude, because no matter how bad it is, it could be worse. My prayer always starts with, I give thanks for a fully functioning body and a fully functioning mind and the willingness to want to heal. Say something like that to yourself. You have to be grateful, because that's going to help you get the balanced perspective and to shut that voice up inside that's telling you something opposite, that's telling you that you're stupid, I'm sorry, excuse my language. You messed up. You messed up. You're not worthy. I'm dumb. I'm not like them. I'm lame. I'm not cool like that person. I'm not this. I'm not that. No, look at what you do have.
Kristen, can you share what negative self-talk might look like in the context of Darrah's example of communication apprehension, where people feel anxiety about responding to an email or answering a phone call?
Yeah, I like the example that we were speaking about a little bit earlier. So you have somebody who reaches out to you because maybe they know you're struggling. And so maybe your initial negative self-talk is, I'm a burden. I don't want to burden this person with what's going on with me. There's too much shame. Nobody wants to hear my story. I'm always in this place. This is not important. They have too much going on, right? So there's that negative thread. And I think the positive thread is, this person reached out to me. They care about me. They're okay with me struggling a little bit. That's why they reached out. I'm going to make this phone call. I'm a good friend and a good person, and this person cares for me. So literally replacing the thought. And I think you have to force yourself initially to replace the thought. I mean, I don't think it comes easy. So you either need to write it down or have it in a journal or on a note card or somewhere that you can actually pay attention to it. So when you're faced with the moment, you can remember to change that thought.
How would you respond to a skeptic who might say, that sounds like you're shoving positivity into your brain and that you need to experience those negative thoughts?
Well, I would say that's just not true. I mean, as much positivity, to your point, that you can shove in your brain, the better. There is nothing wrong with having positive thoughts. Now, I guess that perhaps maybe what you were getting at is sweeping things under the rug, right? And just rose-colored glasses. But I don't think that's true. I mean, I think particularly with positive self-talk, you're replacing a negative cognition that you need to get rid of, that by and large is not true. You made it up, right? People reach out to you because they love you and care for you. So you don't have, you're not required to think negative things.
Do you think repetition is important when you're trying to rewire those negative thought circuits in your brain?
I do, and I believe in the power of writing things down. I think most of us who have negative thoughts, and we all have them, by the way, so let me just normalize that. It would be abnormal to not have some negative thoughts about yourself. That's just what happens. I would recommend writing those thoughts down. Write them down, label them, identify them, and then think through, okay, what's my positive thought here? And I think you have to be really proactive and say, we all kind of know, I think, when our brain's going down a rabbit hole. I mean, we all know that feeling, myself included. And so when we start to recognize, my brain's making a left turn, go pick up your journal, what you wrote down, read it. Ask yourself, is this true? Is this a helpful thought? Is this helping me today? The likelihood that the answer is no is pretty high. And so it's then reading, I think, and saying that positive thought to yourself and say, okay, I'm going to make a decision to replace that thought today.
We're now going to hear a quick word from our sponsor.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy works. But what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships or at work, not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better, because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself, because you are your greatest asset. And special offer to Stronger Than You Think listeners. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/stronger. That's betterhelp.com/stronger. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this episode.
Darrah, do you have any examples of fear-based thoughts that don't serve you but can sneak in and sort of become intrusive and take over if you're not vigilant about analyzing them as just thoughts?
You know, whenever I have those bouts with depression and anxiety, like, oh my God, is something wrong with me? Or another one that something I don't even really talk much about, with the fear of being alone, like fear that you won't find a partner who would really want to be with you. Who would really want to accept that? Can he really love me? Can he understand me? Will he want to help deal with my mom? Because when you marry someone, you know, which is something I want marriage and I want kids, but that was always a fear, always. And it is somewhat today, but not as much, but it still lingers in the back of my mind. So yeah, those are the challenges. And then also it's so hard dealing with a parent with mental illness in a society that stigmatizes mental illness too. So you know, so it's like, I don't want to share this with people, but yet should I be ashamed? I shouldn't have shame, but yet I have shame a little bit. And so yeah, just always having to be a parent to somebody your whole life. And sometimes when they can get irrational and y'all butt heads, but yet you still got to take care of that person no matter what, because that's your mom.
Kristen, can you speak a little bit about how positive affirmations can take time to show results, and that if you're expecting your self-thoughts to change immediately or overnight, that you might be disappointed and the affirmations might just feel like lies, and then you quit and you don't get to see the long-term results that you might get after months or years of making this a habit?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's like anything in our life that we try to do that's important to us. You don't become good at something overnight. I mean, I don't care what it is, whether you're deciding you're going to play the piano or deciding you're going to, change your way of thinking. We think the way we think because we've experienced typically years and years of negative thought patterns. To expect yourself to have overcome that in a day or two is not realistic, and that's okay. And so I think part of it is normalizing the fact that this is going to take me a minute. And some days it's going to work and I'm going to feel okay. And some days it's not, and I'm going to have to try harder. That is a part of the process. And I agree with you. I think it's a behavioral change that comes over time, and it will be different for every single person, right? Because we're all so different.
Darrah, have you experienced a mindset shift that's brought you full circle to where you are today?
It's been a full circle moment. Just first off, even this interview with Youth Villages is a full circle moment because Youth Villages is why I'm where I'm at. This is one of the major reasons. But now my current role with the mayor's office, I work in the neighborhood concerns team, and one of the neighborhoods I work with is the neighborhood I grew up with. I work with the Riverview, Kansas Neighborhood Association. I grew up on Kansas, and I recently in July I did a neighborhood tour, and I was overcome with emotion, and I had to hold it in because the resident, she wanted me to look at areas right by my old middle school, and seeing it with my adult eyes, so much blight. I mean, grass as high as we are. I felt so sad, not only for the young Darrah, but for all the kids I went to school with. Like, we walked to school with this. Like, no wonder I was a daydreamer, because I was not gonna accept that in my inner vision. I was like, no, this is depressing. I'm not gonna. But I mean, it was so emotional for me that I felt so weird. I had to like sit in the car after that and just gather myself, because I was like, I cannot believe we grew up with this as kids, and they're still dealing with this right now. And so part of that purpose, I'm now in a position to help my neighborhood like I said I would, like I always knew.
If you could go back and speak to the young Darrah, what would you say?
You're gonna make me cry thinking about that. I mean, I would tell her that she's so strong, and I would tell her to believe in yourself more and be patient. But I mean, the reason it makes me cry is because when I was a 10-year-old little girl, I was so confident. You couldn't tell me anything. I knew. It's like now the older me has had to reconcile and, support myself and encourage myself and see that truth. So I've actually been tapping back to the young Darrah and thinking about her like, I want to be as fearless as you are. Like, because I always knew. I just always knew. So, yes. Sorry.
Finally, what would you say to someone who shares your experience of struggling with being the child of a parent with mental illness?
No matter what circumstance you come from, you still a human. You're worthy just because you're alive. You have a purpose just because you're alive. So, I mean, I as a person who, of course, I've overcome a lot of challenges. Again, I still have so much to be grateful for. I know people that have overcome a lot worse than I have. There's just so many factors. Mental illness is something that is not spoken about enough in America. There's a stigma attached to it. And if my mama wasn't dealing with mental illness, we probably wouldn't have been connected to the foster care system. But if my mama didn't have her children, where would she be? So it was difficult. Now, I'm not going to skirt over the fact that, growing up, it was hard. And my mom did have some challenges, but I'm a champion for my mom, and I'm a champion for all people dealing with mental illness. And I don't ever want her or any parent in that similar situation to live with any guilt or shame, because it's already enough guilt and shame with the diagnosis. But it was certainly hard for us as children growing up with it. To all of my fellow foster youth, alumni, or maybe you're in foster care right now, or maybe you're in that dark stage that I talked about that seems to happen in your 20s, just know that you're not alone. You are loved, you are valued, you are strong, and keep gratitude first, and you got this.
This episode is dedicated to Darrah's mother, who sadly passed away after this episode was recorded. From Youth Villages, I'd like to say thank you for listening to the first episode of Stronger Than You Think. And thank you to Darrah for sharing your story with us. Darrah's passion right now is an organization she founded called Civics Made Simple, which is a civics engagement initiative aimed at informing Memphis voters about the local political landscape. You can find them on social media at Civics Made Simple. If you'd like to get involved with Youth Villages, go to youthvillages.org where you can find more information about our programs and how you can help. If you need immediate support, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to support the show, the best thing you can do is recommend it to a friend. Maybe share it with someone you think might need it right now. We'd also love to hear what you thought of today's episode, so leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Production support was provided by Parasar Studios in Memphis, Tennessee. On behalf of Youth Villages, this is Alec Ogg reminding you that you're stronger than you think.